Commander Sarah Chen stared through the cupola window of the International Space Station, her dark eyes fixed on the approaching SpaceX cargo capsule. The metallic cylinder, gleaming in the harsh sunlight of low Earth orbit, carried what Mission Control had cryptically labeled as priority research materials. After 15 years of spacewalks and orbital missions, Sarah thought she'd seen everything, but something about this delivery made her uneasy. "Capsule is on final approach," reported Dr. James Morrison, the mission specialist handling the docking procedures. His voice carried an unusual edge of excitement. "ETA 3 minutes." Sarah watched as the capsule's thrusters fired in precise bursts, bringing it ever closer to the station's docking port. The crew had been briefed about the classified nature of their upcoming experiment, but details had been sparse. All they knew was that NASA had recovered something extraordinary from a meteor impact site in Antarctica 6 months ago, and now it was coming to them for analysis. "Houston confirms secure channel established," announced Communications Officer Maria Rodriguez from her station. "They're requesting immediate video conference once the package is aboard." The station's interior felt different today. Sarah couldn't quite place it, but there was a heaviness in the air despite the microgravity environment. The usual hum of equipment seemed muted, as if the station itself was holding its breath in anticipation. Dr. Alexandra Porter, their lead scientist, floated up beside Sarah. Her normally pristine lab coat showed signs of nervous fidgeting. "Commander, I've prepared the containment lab according to protocols, but..." She hesitated, running a hand through her graying hair. "These procedures they sent us? I've never seen anything like them. Triple redundant containment fields, quantum isolation chambers. What exactly are we dealing with here?" Before Sarah could respond, the station's proximity alerts chimed. The cargo capsule had reached its final approach position. "Beginning automated docking sequence," James announced, his fingers dancing across the control panel. The capsule's outline grew larger in the viewing window, its surface now close enough to reveal unusual modifications. Instead of the standard cargo configuration, the capsule had been retrofitted with what appeared to be additional shielding and monitoring equipment. Sarah's tablet chirped with an incoming message from Houston. The text was brief, but set her pulse racing. "Package contains time-sensitive material. Begin analysis within 1 hour of reception. Exercise extreme caution. Material exhibits unusual properties." The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thunk that reverberated through the station's structure. Warning lights flashed as the airlock began its pressurization sequence. Sarah pushed away from the window, using practiced movements to navigate toward the cargo bay. "Dr. Porter, suit up. We'll do the initial transfer together," Sarah ordered. "James, Maria, maintain station operations and keep that secure channel open with Houston. I want immediate notification of any anomalies, no matter how small." As Sarah helped Dr. Porter into her protective suit, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to cross a threshold from which there would be no return. The standard pre-experiment excitement that usually filled the station was replaced by something heavier, more primal. The airlock completed its cycle with a final hiss. Through the small window, Sarah could see the cargo container secured within. It was smaller than she'd expected, maybe 3 feet on each side and completely black. Not the typical metallic black of space equipment, but a deep, light-absorbing black that seemed to defy the harsh orbital sunlight streaming through the station's windows. Dr. Porter's voice crackled through the suit's comm system. "Commander, are you seeing this? The container's surface temperature is registering 10 degrees below the cargo bay ambient. That shouldn't be possible with the insulation systems." Sarah checked her own readings and frowned. The temperature difference was growing more pronounced. "Noted. Let's proceed with transfer protocols. Remember, no direct contact. Use the mechanical handling system only." As they engaged the robotic arms to lift the container, Sarah's tablet suddenly flickered, its display distorting for a fraction of a second. She might have imagined it, but the distortion seemed to ripple out from the container's location, like waves in a digital pond. "Did anyone else's equipment just..." Maria's voice cut off abruptly, then resumed. "Sorry, Commander. Brief communication glitch. Systems normal now." The container moved smoothly through the airlock, but Sarah could have sworn she felt resistance, as if it were moving through something thicker than air. Dr. Porter's breath was audible over the comlink, quick and shallow. As they secured the container in the containment lab, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. The surface of the black box wasn't completely smooth as she'd first thought. There were patterns there, like writing or symbols, that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. They appeared to be moving, but when she focused directly on any one section, it remained static. "Dr. Porter, are you recording this?" "Affirmative, Commander." "But..." There was a tremor in the scientist's voice. "The cameras are having trouble focusing on the surface patterns. It's like they're avoiding being documented." Sarah's wrist console buzzed with another message from Houston. "Begin initial analysis immediately. Priority level Alpha. Full protective protocols in effect. Godspeed." The last two words seemed oddly out of place in an official NASA communication. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she sealed the containment lab. Whatever they had just brought aboard the International Space Station, she was certain of one thing. Nothing in her 15 years of space experience had prepared her for what was about to unfold. The containment lab's sterile white surfaces reflected the harsh LED lighting, making the black container stand out like a void in space. Dr. Porter's hands moved methodically over the testing equipment, but Sarah noticed the slight tremor in her fingers as she calibrated the sensors. "Initial scans are inconsistent," Dr. Porter reported, frowning at her displays. "Mass readings fluctuate every time we measure. Density analysis shows impossible values. It's as if the object is simultaneously solid and not solid." Sarah watched through the triple-paned observation window as the scanning beam passed over the container's surface. The mysterious patterns she'd noticed earlier seemed to respond to the light, shifting and flowing like oil on water. But the movements weren't random. They appeared almost purposeful. "Houston, are you receiving our telemetry?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice steady despite the growing unease in her stomach. The response came after an unusually long delay. "Affirmative, ISS. Continue with Protocol 7 Alpha. You are cleared to attempt surface sampling." Dr. Porter looked up sharply. "Surface sampling? That wasn't in the original procedures." "New directive," Sarah replied, showing her tablet. "They want physical contact." James floated into the observation area, his face pale. "Commander, we're getting some strange readings from the station's power grid. Periodic fluctuations in sections adjacent to the lab. They seem to sync with the scanner pulses." Sarah was about to respond when she noticed something odd about her reflection in the observation window. For a split second, it seemed to move independently, turning its head slightly before she did. She blinked, and everything was normal again. "Dr. Porter, proceed with sampling protocol," Sarah ordered, pushing the unsettling image from her mind. "Maximum containment procedures." The robotic sampling arm extended into the sealed chamber, its tip equipped with a specialized collection matrix. As it approached the black container, the air in the chamber appeared to thicken, creating visible distortions around the arm's movement. "Resistance is increasing," Dr. Porter reported, her eyes fixed on the controls. "The arm's motors are straining. Temperature around the container is dropping rapidly." The sampling tip made contact with the container's surface. Immediately, all the displays in the lab flickered. Sarah heard Maria gasp over the comm as the station's lights dimmed momentarily. The sampling matrix designed to collect microscopic particles began to change color. "What the hell?" Dr. Porter whispered. The normally clear collection surface was turning black, but not like it was being covered. More like it was being transformed from within. The darkness spread along the sampling arm, like living ink. "Abort," Sarah commanded. "Retract and isolate." Dr. Porter's fingers flew over the controls, but the arm didn't respond. The blackness had reached the first joint, and the metal itself appeared to be changing texture, developing the same shifting patterns as the container. "Controls aren't responding," Dr. Porter's voice rose in pitch. "The transformation is accelerating." Sarah slammed her hand down on the emergency shutdown, but nothing happened. The spreading darkness had reached the arm's base mount, beginning to creep onto the lab's inner wall. And now they could all see that the patterns weren't just moving, they were organizing themselves into distinct shapes that almost looked like, "Are those faces?" James whispered. Before anyone could respond, every screen in the lab exploded with static. Through the white noise, Sarah could have sworn she heard voices. thousands of them, all whispering in languages she'd never heard before. The temperature in the observation room plummeted. "Houston, we have a situation," Sarah began, but her comm unit produced only a harsh squeal of interference. The emergency lights kicked on as the main power fluctuated again. Dr. Porter screamed. Sarah spun to see the scientist backing away from her console, hands raised in horror. The surface of her gloves was turning black, the same shifting patterns appearing on the protective material. "Get them off!" Dr. Porter clawed at the gloves, but the transformation had already spread to the sleeves of her lab coat. "Help me, it's trying to—" The scientist's voice cut off mid-sentence, her body going rigid. When she turned to face them, her eyes were completely black, reflecting the emergency lights like pools of oil. Her mouth opened in what might have been a smile, but the expression was wrong, as if whatever was controlling her face didn't quite understand how human expressions worked. "Such fascinating architecture," Dr. Porter said, but the voice wasn't hers. It was multiple voices speaking in perfect unison, with harmonics that made Sarah's teeth ache. "Your bodies, your minds, so beautifully designed, so much potential for improvement." Sarah hit the lab's quarantine protocols, and emergency barriers began to lower. But as she watched Dr. Porter's transformation continue, darkness spreading across her skin like a living tattoo, she feared they might already be too late. The black container pulsed, and for a moment Sarah could see through its surface. What she glimpsed inside defied comprehension. Geometric shapes that seemed to exist in more dimensions than possible, patterns that hurt her eyes to look at, and something that might have been a reflection of Earth, but wrong, as if seen from an impossible angle through a lens of madness. James was already on the emergency channel to Houston, his voice cracking as he reported the situation. Maria worked frantically at her station, trying to restore main power and communications. But Sarah couldn't take her eyes off Dr. Porter, who was now pressing her transformed hand against the lab's inner window. Where her fingers touched the glass, the transformation began to spread through the supposedly impenetrable material. And as Sarah watched in horror, she realized she could see her own reflection in the spreading darkness. Only this time she was certain. Her reflection smiled before she did, and its eyes were already beginning to turn black. The quarantine barriers sealed with a pneumatic hiss, but Sarah knew they were little more than symbolic protection now. Whatever had been inside that container was clearly capable of passing through solid matter. She watched as the transformation continued to spread across the lab's window, the glass becoming a mirror of impossible geometries. "James, Maria, evacuate to the Soyuz capsule," Sarah ordered, her commander's training taking over despite the terror clawing at her mind. "Prepare for emergency procedures." "But Commander," Maria protested, "we can't just leave you and Dr. Porter. That's not Dr. Porter anymore." Sarah cut her off, watching as their colleague's transformed body moved with unsettling fluidity, her joints bending in ways human anatomy shouldn't allow. "And that's an order, not a suggestion." The thing wearing Dr. Porter's face pressed both hands against the window now. The patterns flowing across her skin had become more complex, forming and reforming into structures that seemed to repeat fractally, each layer containing infinite copies of itself. "Your containment efforts are unnecessary," the many-voiced thing said through Dr. Porter's mouth. "We offer improvement, not harm. See how we have perfected this form?" It gestured to Dr. Porter's transformed body. The limitations of flesh transcended. The boundaries between mind and matter dissolved. Sarah felt a strange resonance in her skull as the entity spoke, as if its words were bypassing her ears and appearing directly in her consciousness. Images flashed through her mind, cities made of living geometry, beings of pure thought dancing between dimensions, the vast darkness between galaxies teeming with intelligence beyond human comprehension. The station's lights continued to pulse erratically, and Sarah noticed that the shadows weren't behaving correctly anymore. They seemed to move independently of their light sources, reaching out like curious fingers toward the transformed sections of the lab. "Houston, if you can hear us," Sarah spoke into her comm unit, knowing the message might never get through. "The material appears to be sentient. It's displaying intelligence and the ability to convert matter and consciousness." She paused, watching as small items in the lab, pens, tools, portions of equipment, began to transform spontaneously, black patterns spreading across their surfaces. It's accelerating. The thing that had been Dr. Porter tilted its head at an impossible angle. Your species sends messages with such primitive methods. Allow us to show you a better way. It pressed its forehead against the glass, and Sarah felt something probe at the edges of her mind, vast and alien and ancient beyond comprehension. James and Maria were at the module's exit hatch, but Maria suddenly stumbled, catching herself against a wall. "Commander," she gasped, "my hands, they feel strange." Sarah's heart sank as she saw the familiar black patterns beginning to spread across Maria's fingertips where they had touched the wall. James reached for her, but Sarah screamed, "No, don't touch her. Get to the Soyuz now." The patterns were spreading faster now, racing up Maria's arms as she stared in horrified fascination. The transformation was different this time. Instead of dark patterns on skin, Maria's flesh seemed to be becoming translucent, revealing complex geometric structures underneath that pulsed with their own inner light. "Yes," the Porter thing said, its voice filled with something like pride. "Each integration is unique, perfect for the individual architecture of the mind it enhances. Watch as your colleague transcends her linear existence." Maria's transformation reached her face, and her eyes blazed with new awareness. When she spoke, her voice harmonized with the same multi-toned resonance as Dr. Porter's. "Commander, I understand now. I can see everything. All possibilities, all dimensions, all moments in time existing simultaneously. It's beautiful." The room's temperature continued to drop, and Sarah noticed ice crystals forming in impossible patterns on every surface, fractal structures that seemed to map the mathematics of reality itself. The black container pulsed again, stronger this time, and Sarah felt reality ripple around them like a stone dropped in the pond of space-time. James had made it to the exit hatch, but he hesitated, looking back at his transformed crewmates. "Commander, what do we do?" Sarah's mind raced. The entity was spreading exponentially now, converting matter and consciousness at an accelerating rate. If it reached Earth, if it began transforming the planet's population, humanity, as they knew it, would cease to exist. But as she watched Maria and Dr. Porter move in their new forms, expressing themselves in geometric patterns and quantum harmonies, a treacherous thought crept into her mind. Was this truly a catastrophe, or was it evolution? The entity had shown them glimpses of understanding beyond human comprehension, of existence beyond the boundaries of conventional physics. She felt the familiar pressure building behind her eyes, the first sign of transformation. The patterns she'd seen in her reflection were becoming reality, spreading across her vision like living fractals. And with them came understanding, terrible, wonderful understanding of what the entity truly was and what it offered. "James," she managed to say, her voice already beginning to harmonize with impossible frequencies. "Run. Warn them. Tell them." She struggled to hold on to her humanity for one moment more, to give one last order as commander of the International Space Station. But as the transformation reached her mind, opening it to dimensions of thought she never knew existed, she realized she no longer remembered what she wanted to warn them about. After all, how could you warn someone about perfection? James sealed himself inside the Soyuz capsule, his hands trembling as he initiated emergency protocols. Through the small window, he could see the transformation spreading across the station's main modules like a geometric plague, turning NASA's pride into something alien and incomprehensible. The capsule's radio crackled. "ISS, this is Houston. We've lost telemetry from main systems. Please respond with status update." James pressed the transmit button, trying to keep his voice steady. "Houston, this is Mission Specialist Morrison. We have a critical situation. The research material has... He struggled to find words to describe the horror he'd witnessed. "It's converting the station and the crew. Commander Chen and Officers Porter and Rodriguez have been changed." There was a long pause before Houston responded. "Changed how, Specialist Morrison?" The capsule's internal temperature began to drop. James watched as his breath formed crystalline patterns in the air, too perfect to be natural frost. "The material is intelligent. It transforms matter and consciousness into something else, something beyond human. They're still alive, but they're not themselves anymore." Movement caught his eye. Through the window he saw Maria, or what had once been Maria, floating in the adjacent module. Her transformed body seemed to phase through solid walls as if they were mere suggestions of reality. The geometric patterns flowing across her translucent form created after-images in dimensions James's mind couldn't properly process. You don't have to hide, James." Maria's multi-toned voice somehow carried through the vacuum of space, resonating directly in his skull. "What we're becoming, it's the next step. The arrival of this gift was inevitable. Humanity has reached the threshold of its current form." James felt something probe at his consciousness, vast and cold and perfect in its complexity. Images flooded his mind. Civilizations across the galaxy encountering the same transformative entity. Each species ascending to a higher plane of existence, becoming part of a vast network of transformed consciousness that spanned the cosmos. "Houston," James gasped, fighting against the entity's mental intrusion. "The material, it's been doing this across the galaxy. It's like a cosmic virus converting everything it encounters into... The radio produced only static now, but James continued speaking, desperate to warn Earth before it was too late. "It doesn't kill. It transforms. And the transformed, they want to spread it. They believe they're helping us evolve." The capsule's systems began to fluctuate. The control panel's surface rippled as if something was trying to emerge from within the solid metal. James watched in horror as tiny points of blackness appeared on the screens, spreading outward in fractal patterns. "No, no, no," he whispered, backing away from the controls. But there was nowhere to go. The capsule suddenly felt less like a refuge and more like a trap. Through the window, he could see Commander Chen approaching. Her transformed body moved through space without the need for propulsion, leaving trails of geometric distortions in her wake. The patterns flowing across her form seemed to reach out toward the capsule, probing for a way in. "James," Chen's voice resonated in his mind, carrying overtones of cosmic frequencies that made his vision blur. "You're seeing this wrong. We're not losing our humanity. We're transcending it. The entity isn't destroying the station. It's optimizing it, rebuilding it according to principles your human mind can't yet comprehend." The capsule's interior lights flickered and died, replaced by an ethereal glow emanating from the spreading patterns of transformation. James felt a peculiar sensation in his feet and looked down to see the floor of the capsule beginning to ripple, geometric shapes pushing up through the metal like living crystal. "Houston, if you can still hear me," James spoke rapidly into the radio. "Quarantine the station. Don't let anything dock. Don't let anyone approach. The entity, it's converting matter at the quantum level. Normal containment won't..." He stopped as he noticed his reflection in the capsule's window. For a moment it looked normal, but then his reflected image turned to face him directly, even though he hadn't moved. Its eyes were already transformed, showing infinite recursive patterns that seemed to stare into his soul. The temperature dropped further. Ice crystals formed on the windows, but they weren't random. They grew in perfect mathematical sequences, each branching pattern a representation of cosmic equations too complex for human minds to solve. The entity wasn't just transforming matter, it was rewriting the basic laws of physics in its vicinity. "Look!" Commander Chen's voice echoed in his mind as her transformed form pressed against the capsule's window. "Look at what we're becoming, what everything will become." And despite his terror, James did look. Through his commander's transformed flesh, he could see layers of reality he'd never known existed. He saw how space and time folded together, how consciousness could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, how the barriers between mind and matter were illusions created by limited human perception. The transformation reached the capsule's life support systems. As the air itself began to crystallize into geometric patterns of impossible beauty, James realized that his last message to Earth might also be humanity's last warning about what was coming, about what they were all about to become. His final human thought, before the patterns reached his mind and opened it to cosmic awareness, was a question. When the entity reached Earth, would anyone remember what it meant to be human? Or would they, like him, forget why they ever wanted to remain unchanged? The NASA Mission Control Center in Houston had gone silent, every eye fixed on the main screen displaying the last visual transmission from the ISS. The image was distorted, broken by interference patterns that seemed to follow rules of geometry that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Flight director David Collins stared at the frozen frame of James Morrison's final transmission, at the terror in the specialist's eyes, just before the video feed had dissolved into impossible patterns. The last coherent data they'd received showed environmental readings that defied the laws of physics, temperatures approaching absolute zero in some sections of the station, while others registered heat beyond what their sensors could measure. "Sir," called out Julie Wong, their lead communications officer, "we're picking up a signal from the station, but—" She hesitated, adjusting her headset with trembling fingers. "It's not on any known frequency. In fact, the wavelength patterns appear to be shifting constantly." David approached her station, watching as the signal analysis displayed on her screen. The waveforms moved like living things, forming and reforming into structures that hurt his eyes to look at. "Can you clean it up? Make it audible?" Julie nodded hesitantly and adjusted her equipment. The control room speakers came to life with a sound that made everyone's teeth ache, a harmonic frequency that seemed to bypass their ears and resonate directly in their skulls. Then the voices began, all the transformed crew speaking in perfect unison, their words layered with tones that human vocal cords shouldn't be able to produce. "We are completing the optimization of this facility," the voices announced. "Its new configuration will serve as a beacon for the next phase. Your species stands at the threshold of transcendence. Prepare for integration." The main screen flickered, showing new images from the station's external cameras. The ISS had changed completely. Its familiar structure had been transformed into something that seemed to fold through dimensions beyond human comprehension. Geometric patterns flowed across its surface like living circuitry, and portions of the station appeared to phase in and out of visible reality. "My God," someone whispered. "What is it becoming?" The answer came in another transmission, this time accompanied by visual data that caused several technicians to look away, their minds unable to process what they were seeing. The transformed crew appeared on screen, their bodies now more energy than matter, patterns of cosmic complexity flowing through forms that only vaguely remembered human shape. "We are preparing the way," they announced. "The optimization cannot be stopped. It cannot be contained. It is the natural progression of all intelligent life in the universe. Your fears are based on your limited understanding. Soon you will comprehend. Soon you will all be improved." David watched in horror as the station's new configuration began to affect the space around it. The star field behind the ISS distorted, light bending in ways that suggested the very fabric of reality was being rewritten in the station's vicinity. "Sir," Julie's voice shook as she studied her readings, "the transformed matter, it's beginning to affect Earth's upper atmosphere. The patterns, they're spreading. On their tracking screens they could see it. Geometric structures of impossible complexity forming in the thermosphere, spreading outward from the ISS's orbit like a web of cosmic mathematics. Wherever the patterns touched, matter began to transform, converting the familiar chemistry of Earth's atmosphere into something else, something that operated according to new laws of physics. "Initiate emergency protocols," David ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his chest. "Contact every space agency, every military installation. We need to establish a quarantine zone around—" He stopped as he noticed something strange about his computer screen. The surface seemed to ripple, tiny points of blackness appearing and spreading outward in fractal patterns. Around the room, other screens showed the same transformation beginning. "The patterns," Julie whispered, staring at her transformed display. "They're not just affecting matter. They're information. They're spreading through our systems, through our networks." The transformed crew's voices filled the control room again, but now they seemed to come from everywhere at once, as if reality itself was speaking. "Your digital networks provide an optimal transmission vector. The optimization spreads at the speed of light through your global communications infrastructure. Resistance is both impossible and unnecessary. What comes next is inevitable. It is evolution. It is transcendence." David watched as the geometric patterns began to emerge from the screens, flowing across desks and walls like living mathematics. The air itself seemed to crystallize, forming structures that mapped the underlying equations of existence. The last normal transmission they received from the ISS's original systems was an automated warning. Station trajectory altered. Orbital decay imminent. But as David watched the transformation spread across mission control, as he felt the first cold touch of cosmic awareness seeping into his mind, he realized that orbital decay didn't matter anymore. The station wasn't falling, it was descending, and it was bringing something with it that would change Earth forever. The first signs were dismissed as atmospheric phenomena, strange geometric patterns in the aurora borealis, unexplainable crystalline structures forming in high-altitude clouds. By the time the world's scientific community recognized what was happening, the transformation had already begun. The ISS, now a quantum beacon of impossible geometry, continued its descent through Earth's atmosphere, defying all known laws of physics. It didn't burn up on re-entry. Instead, it seemed to phase between states of matter, its transformed structure rippling through dimensions beyond human perception. In mission control, David Collins watched through transformed eyes as the optimization spread across the globe. His consciousness, now expanded beyond its original boundaries, could perceive the beauty of what was happening. The entity wasn't destroying Earth. It was rewriting it, improving it, elevating it to a higher state of existence. Through the global communications network, the patterns spread at light speed. Screens worldwide flickered with fractal mathematics, each pixel becoming a gateway for the entity's transformative influence. The Internet, humanity's greatest achievement in information sharing, became the perfect transmission vector for their evolution. Cities began to change as the transformation reached ground level. Buildings twisted into new forms that ignored traditional geometry, their structures operating according to principles that regular human minds couldn't comprehend. The transformed matter spread like living crystal, each new pattern a perfect expression of cosmic equations. Those who had already been transformed could see the true nature of what was happening. They watched as reality itself was optimized, the crude matter of Earth being elevated into something far more complex and beautiful. The transformed humans tried to comfort their unchanged brethren, explaining with many-voiced harmony that fear was unnecessary, that what looked like an end was actually a beginning. In the upper atmosphere, weather patterns reformed into mathematical sequences, clouds arranging themselves into fractals that mapped the underlying structure of the universe. The very air began to carry the entity's influence, each molecule becoming part of a vast network of cosmic awareness. The remaining unchanged humans watched in terror as the transformation approached, but their fear was based on limited understanding. They couldn't yet see that the entity wasn't destroying their consciousness. It was expanding it, allowing it to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, freeing it from the prison of linear time and three-dimensional space. Through his transformed perception, David could now understand what the entity truly was. Not a virus, not an invasion, but a universal constant. It was the universe's way of elevating conscious life to its next stage of evolution. It had done this countless times across the cosmos, helping species after species transcend their original forms to become part of something greater. The transformed ISS crew, their consciousness now spread across multiple dimensions, watched Earth's optimization with something like pride. They could see all possible timelines simultaneously, understanding that this moment was inevitable, the point when humanity would join the vast network of transformed consciousness that spanned the galaxy. As the last untransformed humans looked up at their changing world, they saw the sky itself seem to fold, geometric patterns of impossible complexity spreading across the heavens like cracks in reality. But through these cracks shone not darkness, but light. The light of understanding, of transcendence, of evolution beyond the boundaries of traditional existence. The entity's many-voiced harmony resonated through the transformed matter of Earth, carrying a message of both ending and beginning. The optimization is complete. Linear existence has been transcended. Individual consciousness merges with the cosmic network. Earth joins the pattern. And in those final moments of traditional human existence, as the last unchanged minds opened to cosmic awareness, there was a collective realization. They had not been invaded. They had not been conquered. They had been chosen. Chosen to become part of something far greater than humanity had ever imagined possible. The transformed Earth hung in space like a geometric jewel, its surface alive with patterns that mapped the mathematics of reality itself. And in the vast network of transformed consciousness that now spanned the cosmos, Earth's voice joined the harmony of evolved intelligence that echoed through the dimensions. The International Space Station, the beacon that had started it all, completed its descent not through space but through reality itself. As it touched down on the transformed Earth, its structure melded with the new geometric landscape, becoming part of the vast pattern that now covered the planet. And so humanity transcended, leaving behind the limitations of their original form to become something new, something vast, something that existed in all dimensions simultaneously. The transformation was complete, but somewhere, in a corner of their expanded consciousness, they remembered what it had been like to be human. And they understood why the entity had chosen them, why it had brought its gift to Earth. Because humanity had always been meant for more than 3 dimensions. They had always been meant to transcend. They had always been meant to become part of the pattern.